All right. Hello, Master Your Money listeners. Welcome to this week's show. I am here with my colleague and dear friend, Amelia Nathanson. Amelia is the Vice President of Operations at Barnum. She has been with the firm for over 12 years. And in those 12 years, I have never seen someone handle so many things. And she's had so many different roles and has excelled at every single one of them. But she's been the VP of Ops now for 5 years? Almost 7 years. So she's been the VP of Ops for 7 years now and is just doing an amazing job in that role. So I am thrilled to have her on the show. This is going to be a fun conversation about something that's never really talked about. We really don't talk a lot about life insurance underwriting and what that process entails. And Master Your Money is all about helping our clients master their finances. And life insurance is a big piece of mastering your finances. And the underwriting process is a big piece of life insurance. So I want listeners to walk away feeling good and confident about what life insurance underwriting is and how they could maximize it. And that is where Amelia spends her time all day, every day, and her team. Amelia runs a pretty big team at the firm who all day, every day spend their time bringing clients through the underwriting process and educating them along the way. So she is going to share her wealth of knowledge with all of us, and I cannot wait. So Amelia, thank you and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for that wonderful intro. Definitely some tips and insights that we're going to share today about the process as a whole. Absolutely something we don't focus on per se in terms of the process and what the expectations are. Things just seem to come up throughout the process.
Yeah.
So really giving that overview to the listeners, I think will be very helpful at taking maybe the tension meter down about what they're about to go through and just executing, because the importance of having life insurance in force is so much greater than the different steps along the way.
Yes, definitely. So let's start there. Let's start with just your perspective of kind of an underwriter's perspective of life insurance and what the purpose of the underwriting process is.
Sure. So life insurance to the consumer is taken out for various reasons. They work with their advisor, maybe it's a Barnum advisor, about what their need is. They may need term life insurance. They may need the whole life, whatever they decide upon. We know most important coverage is just the coverage that's enforced when you unfortunately pass away for the benefit of your loved ones, for whatever that goal was. From an underwriting perspective, so if you flip that lens, the underwriter is really just there to assess the risk. So how likely is that insured? How likely is that client to pass away prematurely? And when we say prematurely, from what they've determined is when that person should, from an actuarial standpoint, pass away. So they're literally assessing the risk of that individual dying before the terms of when they expected that person to pass away.
So great place to start. So from the consumer standpoint, when you purchase a policy, you have to think about how long you're living and how long you have to plan for. The underwriter has the unfortunate job of doing the exact opposite.
Correct. Assessing how likely you are to either outlive the terms of that policy or to, for the benefit of the insurance company, take in as much or potentially more income from that policy, right? In order to have it be a win-win for both parties.
That's right. Because essentially the underwriting process will determine your premium, right? That will determine how much you pay.
100%. And that is going to vary based on the carrier, type, your age at the time of underwriting, as well as all the various factors we're going to talk through today as a result of this conversation.
Great. So start with, pretend you're a consumer. And take us through step one. Take us through where the consumer starts.
They can start in a variety of ways, especially in the current market.
Yeah.
So you can be working with an advisor who is a full service planner and maybe someone who can walk you through the various aspects of what's available. They may be representative of multiple carriers. They may be representative of one company as a whole, but basically they are going to be able to walk the individual through the process, which really won't deviate. We can talk about some specified underwriting programs that certain carriers might have that might be beneficial for a certain age group or a certain risk factor that we're going to talk through. But for the most part, they should be talking with the client about what to expect from that process as a whole based on their age mainly, and then some basic broad health questions that the agent should be talking with the advisor about.
Beautiful. Let me interrupt you. And that's after, I would imagine, they've had the conversation of the amount that the person is going to need, that the consumer is going to need for whatever their purpose is.
Certainly.
And of course, the type, because there's various types of life insurance. Right. So after you have that conversation, now we go into underwriting.
Absolutely. And that's where it can get a little bit tricky. As I alluded to a little bit earlier, there are tons of online options. If you go in right now in the little Google machine and type in life insurance, there'll probably be 5 online tools where you can apply right online just because information is so readily available.
Yeah.
That is a very different decision-making process than working with an advisor. And some of those companies may be representative of companies your advisor could be working with as well. It is out there. So just be cognizant of that.
And I love that. And I'm just curious, what is your opinion on the accuracy? Because yes, you could do the full underwriting process digitally now, but mainly there's just a ton of places to get pricing.
Absolutely.
What's your best guess on accuracy there? Not going to hold you to it. Nothing's written in stone, just from your professional perspective.
So what's very interesting about those online sort of mechanisms is the honesty of the individual when they're populating. So I think my answer would be skewed to you because based on maybe there's 5 questions, maybe there's 10 that the little online tool is going to ask. That is going to be predictive of where they're going to send you next.
Yes.
Because most of these tools that want to approve you right then and there, you have to look like maybe 8% of the population to really fly right through there. Everything else is going to spit you into an algorithm that's going to look like traditional underwriting that we're going to talk about today, or spit you out to another vendor company or something along those lines. So without getting into privacy sharing and data, you'd have to really sign your life away at that point in time.
Yes.
I would probably say that there's probably between an 8 and 10% true approval rating of doing that online. And then everything else is really going to turn into what we're going to talk about today with traditional underwriting.
Because at the end of the day, Amelia, and the listeners are they know this or they're going to hear this, the underwriting process is a bit invasive.
Absolutely.
Right. It's very much like getting a mortgage, and it's no matter how you twist it or turn it, especially with your health. Like with a mortgage, it's more about your financial health, but this is your physical health, and it's tough. So when you put your information into a quoting tool, there's no one sitting across from you that you have to say these things out loud to. So it's easier to fudge a number, bring your weight down 20 or 30 pounds. There's no one going to double check it. But then when they do go to verify that,
absolutely,
that's when things change.
Absolutely.
Got it. Okay, great. So take us through what should a consumer expect through the underwriting process?
Absolutely. So there are some pieces of the process that regardless of where you apply through, they're going to look very similar. So traditionally speaking, life insurance was done kind of paper and pen. Agent came out and took down all your information. Now a lot of that is actually done online. But the first piece is going to be what you're applying for. It's going to be basic information about you, where you live, who the beneficiaries of this policy are, what the intent is to a certain extent of what the insurance is, and financial baseline justification for what it is that you're looking for. Then we'll move into what we call a part 2 scenario. The part 2 can be a physical piece of documentation that the client fills out. It can also be an online tool that the client fills out or sent a secure link in order to do that. that can be helpful because it's reflexive.
Mhm.
So how you answer a question may quantify whether or not you need the next question,
Mhm.
but it's all going to be about your medical history.
Mhm.
So health history, typical look back period is about 10 years. Have you had these conditions? Family history is major, which a lot of people do not consider when considering the underwriting process overall. But family history has a huge, huge impact on that mortality again. So I think it's important to pause there. Actually, you've mentioned the word health a couple of times. It's very confusing a lot of times for the consumer.
Mhm.
I'm healthy as a horse. I run every day. I go to the gym every day. I do CrossFit every day.
Yeah.
And mortality factors. So things that you may be recording on this part 2 as part of your own medical history, maybe prescription drugs that you take, and then again, family history, maybe telling a completely different story than your actual health day to day and
At
how
the
you're
moment.
feeling.
Yes. Yes. So if I have breast cancer in my family now, to date, I'm healthy and I think I live a healthy lifestyle, but that is factored into
The underwriting
process.
Outcome potentially. And again, various carriers may look at that history a little bit different.
Yeah.
They may ask for extra testing
Yes.
actually as well to sort of clear the air on you, the applicant, as opposed to just being, an age and a female.
Yep. So how does the consumer start the process? Do they start it in a face-to-face conversation with the advisor? I think you mentioned some basic health questions. What do those look like?
Really good question. So if you're working with an advisor who essentially knows their stuff,
Mhm.
they're going to ask you some of those baseline questions up front.
Mhm.
If they are sitting belly to belly with you,
Mhm.
essentially, what is your height and weight?
Mhm.
That is a huge factor, sort of charted out in most algorithms of what you qualify for from a baseline level. What does your family history look like? Any history of cancer for you? High blood pressure,
Mhm.
cardiac, any kidney type diseases, baseline stuff.
I would imagine like smoking.
Smoking for sure. So sort of a completely different conversation nowadays as well. And then major one, what drugs are you on?
Okay.
Pretty much everybody's on some type of prescription drug.
Mhm.
Some can be considered very benign from a life insurance underwriting standpoint. Some would be considered a little bit more aggressive.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, don't be sorry.
Go ahead.
So smoking, I was going to kind of bucket those.
Yep.
They may ask you about lifestyle. So smoking, drinking.
Got it.
Again, some of these things can be okay, quote unquote, from a life insurance underwriting perspective, but you may be looking at a different bucket or tier and then price.
Yes.
So really important to be honest on a lot of these factors, because if we do move into the additional underwriting requirements, they're all going to come out in the wash.
That's what I was just going to say. What is the advisor doing with this preliminary information?
For sure. What they should be doing is advising you on what to expect for an outcome.
Okay.
So
got it. An outcome as far as price. Got it.
Yes. That you could expect you're going to fly right through this process. You may come out potentially rated, or in and I don't want to use this term, but worst case scenario, do we need to go to some type of guaranteed issue coverage, because the coverage is that important at the time of your death to have in force that yes, you may be paying over and above. It may be a face amount that's not ideal, but you have something. And so by having that upfront conversation, they're setting those expectations appropriately with you. They should also be based on those basic questions, determining a lot of these additional steps that you'll more than likely need to expect.
Yep.
And then timeline. Life insurance underwriting has been going on since the early 1900s, and it's really not that much better. No, I kid. But the general factors of needing to have specimens taken and needing to go back out to your doctors for clarification, they have not changed.
Yeah.
They have not changed. And again, to our earlier conversation about online and algorithmic, most scenarios are going to go down that path as well.
Yes.
So it's just being prepared for, this might be a process that takes me 30 or 60 days. And we shouldn't really be blinded by that life insurance is going to be a a quick little walk in the park. You mentioned the mortgage industry, very similar. The underwriters are going to come back with follow-ups and maybe additional requirements. Yep. And that's really what my team facilitates.
Yes. But I love how you said when you're having that conversation with your advisor, as awkward as it may be, being honest is so important, because I think from what I heard from you, the advisor is looking for red flags. Absolutely. That are going to put a kink in the process, or that they know from their experience is going to take extra long, or that will increase the price, or that just may be no-goes, unfortunately. Things that they hear that, they may say right off the bat, I'm not really sure. We should maybe go in a different direction. And Absolutely. Then you have that conversation.
For sure. Yes, that's definitely something. And you'll know that you're working with an advisor who is doing what's right by each consumer or client if they do stop that, or they do tell you about some of the tougher things to expect.
Yes.
Because they're trying to set that expectation up front.
Yes. Yes. And even if you're healthy, the process just takes long. Mm-hmm. Right? There's no way around that. And you're going to go through kind of where those bottlenecks are, but it just takes a while.
It does.
So understanding that up front.
Sure.
Okay. So as a consumer, I'm sitting with my advisor. We did this preliminary kind of questionnaire, or this preliminary medical. The advisor didn't hear anything crazy. So I'm going to move through the underwriting process. Now what?
So a couple things. We mentioned that part one, so baseline and information that's going to get in front of an underwriter. Mm-hmm. Then that part two information is going to get in front of the underwriter, whether it's that paper and pen document we spoke about, or whether the client does it as an additional step electronically. Just again, depending on the vendor, the carrier's process. Mm-hmm. They will determine at that point in time, or age may determine at that point in time whether a medical exam is required. And a medical exam is an appointment where you can either go to a diagnostic type of center, mm-hmm. or have an examiner come out to your home or place of work. Mm-hmm. And they're going to ask you some more questions, mm-hmm. and make sure that everything matches apples to apples from a validation standpoint. They're also going to likely take some specimens from you, as well as some physical measurements. So they will actually take your height and your weight. They will take your blood pressure, and they will typically take your blood pressure a couple of times just to make sure there's no anomalies there. And then the wonderful specimen process will be taken. So typically that's blood and a urine sample. Yeah. They will then package those up in a very secure way. We call it the chain of custody will not be broken. So those will go via an overnight type of service to a lab. And then those specimens, those labs are run for a particular set of tests that the underwriter is looking for.
So those labs are not sent to your doctor. They're sent to the insurance carrier.
100%. Wow. After the fact, you can ask for a copy of the labs or the lab report to be sent to your doctor, which is actually a very interesting factor for some individuals. One of the most surprising things that's happened through my career is we actually find something on behalf of a client that they had no idea, based on levels or a lab test that's taken.
So wait a minute. So the client will apply for insurance. You, through the advisor, they'll get a medical done, their blood and urine done, send it off to the lab. The labs come back with results. And then the advisor or someone on your team will have to say, we can't give you what we expected for whatever reason. You should go talk to your doctor.
That's literally what the conversation is.
Oh my gosh. And that's how somebody could potentially find out that there's something going on.
So there are obviously protective rules and regulations in place, mainly HIPAA in this particular situation. So there are definitely things that we do not speak to the advisor about, or the underwriter doesn't even speak to us about, but they will say the client should be advised to consult with their medical doctor. The client can always obtain a secure copy of those labs, even if nothing's wrong or happens. They can typically go on a website and put in their personal information and grab a copy of those. Sometimes it goes in the industry as like they get a free medical exam.
Well, that's what I was just thinking. And thank goodness, that's a terrible way to find out something that you didn't expect. I mean, my heart goes out to anyone who that happens to, but at the end of the day, you're still finding out.
Sure.
So thank gosh for that process. But yeah, I was going to ask you if people do use it for that.
Haven't been to the doctor in a while. So, but you raise a really interesting point about how underwriting is different than what your doctor might say about you. So remember, health versus mortality. The labs that the insurance company, and sometimes those vary insurance company to insurance company based on how they rate particular conditions. They're not going to look apples to apples to what you might have just gone for blood work 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's true.
So even though we'll talk about this, they may request records from your medical doctor, and those labs might be a part of that. It's not going to be all the levels that you are testing for, and also specific maybe to the urine sample that the insurance company cares about, if you will. Then, hey, I just had a doctor's appointment. Does that work?
Yes.
Not particularly.
Got it. Yes. So you can't say that you don't need a medical because you were just at the doctor's. It doesn't work that way.
Absolutely.
Which is always where I get tied up. I'm like, I just went for my physical. Why do I have to do this again? But this is also a good time to realize, like, you can't fib on these things. Like no matter if you're talking to the advisor, if you're talking to the medical examiner, like, you can't lie. If you say you don't smoke, they're going to see it in your blood, right? Like, if you say you're not X or your weight is X, they're going to weigh you at some point. So this is not the time to kind of fudge some things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with the information that is so readily available from an electronic standpoint, and this isn't obviously to scare consumers either, also be cognizant of, you could be in that scenario one, that 8 to 10% I talked about, fly right through the process, and the insurance company will audit files from time to time. So medical records might come in, or they may run a prescription check, let's say, again, and realize, hey, we got to go back to this client, and we've seen coverage rescinded. We've seen coverage re-rated. Oh, wow. So you're paying X, now you're going to pay Y. And again, I think worst case scenario is rescinded because essentially you just lied. You falsified information. So we don't even want you as a risk. Sure. Just based on that premise alone.
Yes. So whatever you say, it's being verified in this medical exam.
Sure.
And then what happens? So you do your blood and urine, you have that initial height and weight test by the examiner. The examiner sends your results to the lab in a secure manner. They go to the insurance carrier, and then what?
Great. You got the timeline spot on. So typically those labs will be run in the lab, and the results come back between 4 and 5 business days. The underwriter at that point in time will typically move to your full file. So they'll look at everything once more. Any additional checks that are electronic based that have come in. So things like a motor vehicle report is going to be run on you from a risk standpoint.
Fair. Crazy drivers.
Yes. Baseline credit might get run. Baseline. We're not digging deep unless you are looking for a financial qualification over and above. So there are some scenarios we can talk about that look like high net worth individuals or folks that are going to be applying for XYZ now and then XYZ in the future may underwrite for a full amount and just get more requirements than are needed. But from a general information standpoint, those are going to be your major pieces. So MVR, prescription check, and a baseline credit check. Once they have that full file, the underwriter will determine, hey, I have enough information, or I got to go back to your medical doctor to really substantiate some of the stuff that's going on. Either your answers to questions or to find out how the doctor has determined you should be handling this condition that you have that could be completely manageable and completely benign, but are you taking those appropriate steps? Or has the doctor, and this is really the hang up piece for a lot of cases that take a while, has the doctor recommended that you do additional testing and you haven't done it yet?
Yes.
So you need it. You showed X. It was inconclusive. They recommended Y in 6 months. Hasn't been 6 months. Or you didn't do it 6 months. So now you're scheduling some type of procedure and getting those
to verify that something, hopefully does not exist.
Correct.
Now, in that situation, will they just not give you a rating?
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's a couple things that could happen. They'll postpone the file, just postpone a reading. Everything will remain open. Depending on how long that takes, you may or may not have to re-sign some stale dated documents or what have you. But the file will sort of remain the same. Your labs will still be good. Typically, depending on your age, your labs are actually good for a year once they've been run at the lab and the test results are good for a year, we say. After a certain age, it might be more like 6 months. And just while we're on the age topic, sometimes if you're over a certain age, they may also order an APS at the beginning of the process. So an APS, by the way, stands for attending physician statement. It's medical records.
Those are your records.
So if you're at an age where you should be seeing a doctor every year as part of your general health and wellness, they're just going to order that right outside the gate to make sure you're going, for lack of better words. And you'll still have all of that documentation unearthed by your part 2 as well as your medical exam.
And I would imagine, I mean, if they're ordering medical records from, like I have 3 or 4 different doctors, right? They're ordering all of those records. How does that work? How long does that take? I'm overwhelmed just thinking about that for one person.
Absolutely. It can take a while. Right? I got to be honest with you. Sure. So there are vendors actually who help facilitate this process. Yep. They will reach out to your doctor's office on the insurance company's behalf, or on your behalf, essentially, to get those as quickly as possible. Some doctors' offices do use medical records vendors, or we call them copy services. That can take an exorbitant amount of time.
Sure.
If a client really is like, hey, I'm hot to trot, I need to get this coverage, a lot of times they'll help. They'll call their doctor's office. They'll go on their portal.
Yep.
Pull information down for us. Of course, we like to have that white glove service here and not have that expectation. But listen, if it's going to help the process rather than wait 30 days for some stranger to copy it, they may do that.
And there's no way to fudge that, right? Like a client can't lose sheet 5,
Exactly. And it's important that you raised a really good point. You could see 4 doctors. They may really only care about the PCP or a cardiac doctor if you were asked to go for a workup. They may even only care about that one visit that you saw that particular doctor.
Oh, fair.
They're really just trying to essentially clear the air on that particular concern.
Sure. And I would imagine, is that where the bulk, in a perfect situation, Amelia, it's, this is unicorn and rainbows. How long does the life insurance process take?
That's all really going to depend on that age and amount chart that we really talked about. I would safely say industry-wide, you're looking at about 45 days for the process from start to finish. Again, you're an engaged client who is willing to help the process out, can shift that in either direction. You're on the spot about getting your medical exam. Most examiners or companies, if you're able to go to a Quest Diagnostics or something like that, you're able to be seen in 2 to 3 days. Yeah. So if you're on the ball about it, 45 days feels about right as an average. Okay. We have seen it take 6 months.
Oh, of course.
And then, there's other factors as well. You may get a medical approval. So whether that's a rated or a best class rating, and then need to do trust work. So your advisor is working with you and saying well, these aren't going to be personally owned. They're going to be owned by a trust. So that might stall the actual issuance of the policy being in force. But for our purposes, the underwriting is done.
A good 45 days. And a lot of that, I would imagine, is just hunting down this information.
For sure.
It's not like it's 45 active days that the consumer has to do work. It's just the time it takes for the underwriter to get what they need.
Sure.
Is this process, Amelia, universal?
For the most part, yes. There aren't, outside of, again, you being that sort of perfect specimen or having algorithmic factors that help. Most vendor carriers, insurance companies using those terms, integrated, have some type of algorithmic process here. They are trying to get those best ratings out in front of those candidates as quickly as possible. Just get those risks in force and then spend their underwriting dollars on clients who need the full-fledged process. But all in all, it's about the same.
It's about the same.
Yes.
You talked in the beginning, and I'm dying to get into this, the technical side of underwriting. So when someone says you can get life insurance in 7 minutes, like, is that accurate? Or do you have to be like a superhuman to take advantage of that? Like, can a normal person do that? Talk to us about those types of advertisements.
You do sort of have to be superhuman. And it's an interesting question because you have to be superhuman, but also have enough digital footprint to prove you're superhuman. So it's not okay also to be, let's say,
take my word for it.
Well, be 21 years old and hit none of the checks. They're going to say, oh, who knows?
Yes.
And you'll spit into regular underwriting. So you have to be literally perfect. You have to have enough information digitally for them to obtain. So enough benign prescriptions and a clean NVR
So you can't have like no records, like be 21.
That's really what it is.
I've never gone to the doctor before. I'm so healthy.
That's really what it is. We've actually underwritten twins. So 17, 18 years old. So enough of a digital footprint. They have a driver's license. Mm-hmm. They're hitting some of these medical information pieces, but one twin gets approved algorithmically. The other one says, nope, you go.
Get out.
You do not pass go.
Get out.
And just literally because they're different humans, right? And they just didn't pass the algorithm.
Yes. It's almost like credit, how when you're younger, you have no credit. So, so your credit score is low because you have none. You have nothing to show that you can pay. So that's interesting. It's the same.
Yes. And we refer to it a lot of times as that digital footprint.
Footprint. What's included in that? Like what?
So anything that's public record in terms of also underwriting factors that they care about. They're not going to Google you and find out if you're an all-state athlete per se.
But that should count.
It should. And for some,
but it doesn't.
For some professional athletes, it might give them a little bit more. But unfortunately, your softball tournament in high school doesn't really apply.
Darn.
So medical records, again, baseline credit stuff, and really at this point it would be prescription history. Okay. So as long as everything looked pretty much.
Because that's public.
Yes, that's public. There's also something called the MIB, or Medical Information Bureau, which is also public record. Those are, without getting too technical, coding. So if you've applied for life insurance every year for the last 7 years and never taken the life insurance, that's going to pop.
Oh, they're going to say, get out.
And they may not, but they're definitely looking at how did this get coded? If you got rated and didn't take it, how did that get coded? Okay. So that's all once an underwriting outcome has been determined, will feed into that Medical Information Bureau database.
Oh, that's so interesting. What about all of this health information that my iPhone is collecting, like all these health apps I use? How does any of that come into play?
So there were a couple of carriers, a couple of vendors that pre-COVID were like very hot to trot on this. They had full underwriting programs that gave you a tracker and said, use this and we'll tell you what credits you apply for in terms of your life insurance. I'm not sure that it worked from an algorithmic standpoint, because if you are to Google that topic, most of the articles are from 2019, 2020. I think it more morphed into the health insurance space and getting credit for your activity or your steps and credits that way. I'm not sure if medical underwriting ever hit how it affected mortality.
You think it will?
I think more information will start to be prevalent and it will impact the life insurance space differently. I don't know if your iWatch is ever going to really impact.
Really? Because I close my rings like almost every day.
Well, tell your doctor and have that be part of your medical
I will.
history.
I will.
And that'll be very helpful.
I was hoping I could just send, them a screenshot and they take my word for it and I can get a break in premium.
But they do advisors really do sometimes like to tell us, my client runs marathons. And we're like, well, that's fabulous. But from a mortality standpoint, not really. And so that's really what we've seen in terms of the information that can be gathered. It is sort of health information and not necessarily mortality or underwriting information per se.
Both equally important.
Absolutely.
Still keep running those marathons. I'm going to still keep closing my rings.
Listen, it's still impacting that height and weight. So we care about it. So.
Yes, there you go. Oh, perfect. Along those lines, Amelia, I'm curious. For a friend, asking for a friend. Where does, kind of recreational marijuana, alcohol, where do all these little vices sit on this spectrum? Are they accounted for in any way, shape, or form? Again, asking for a friend.
Well, you don't really have to ask for a friend anymore, right? Because the things you named specifically are becoming legal in most states, right? So insurance companies had to sort of not change, I won't use that, but flex on how they consider some of these pieces. So you'll see a variety of things. Some carriers don't actually test urine for marijuana.
Okay.
They test for all other types of drugs, and most of those other drugs are going to kick you right out to a decline status. So certainly if you do partake, you are not going to want to partake prior to your medical exam.
Okay.
And we'll talk about other scenarios, best case outcomes for that medical exam as well. But marijuana really was always more so considered because of the way you had to ingest it, you had to smoke it. So we haven't focused a lot on the smoker rating, I think, because a lot of people don't smoke anymore. But certainly if there is any nicotine cessation drugs, anything in your urine, you are getting a smoker rating. And again, I used this term before, do not pass go. You're not getting another chance.
Yeah.
So you're either taking the coverage and waiting a year to potentially reapply as a non-smoker. But if it hits, you're getting that smoker rating. So some carriers consider the ingesting of the marijuana a smoker rating. Okay. And they will, some other carriers will test for the marijuana, and bada bing, bada boom, you see how that works.
That goes.
Some carriers, because they're asking you the question as well, so they're getting your labs, but they're also asking, consider things like cigar smoking. So celebratory cigars, maybe 1 or 2 a month, if you are open and honest about that. And you do pop for something in your urine, they will consider that because it will match what you applied for, right? That you're a cigar smoker and you may qualify for non-smoker ratings. But I think that's the biggest one up front is the marijuana. And I think that's probably where we'll see more carriers shift to maybe not testing for it or looking at it in a different way.
Well, looking at it almost like alcohol, like we talked about in the prep call, where it's like, once to twice a week, 2 to 3 times a week, or you have a problem. So I would imagine it's taken into consideration like that.
To a certain extent, yes. So and I don't want you to think there are some knockout tests in the blood and urine, but there are also some where a company may come back out to you with a sheet that asks you to answer some more specific questions about recreational types of use. So they may ask you questions about alcohol use or, drug use and how often, or what the history of it was, if you are honest about it and now it doesn't exist, or it's in your medical records and now we're kind of talking through it. So I don't want consumers to think like, oh, I'm out because I had quite the life in college. But they will ask you some more qualifying questions again to determine is that impacting your overall mortality risk?
Sure. And I would imagine that's a conversation that you would have with your advisor and they would steer you in the direction. That's your best course. That's going to give you the very best outcome of success.
Very similar to how a company might look at breast cancer history differently than another one.
Got it.
Some may be a little bit more flexible on marijuana usage or alcohol usage or what have you.
Oh, got it. Speaking of that, and we'll close up after this, but can you give everybody some tips on how to maximize that medical exam? So you've submitted all your information and now they are coming back and say, oh, Elizabeth, you're not as healthy as you think you are. Or you're not as stellar as you think you are. We need to give you a medical. We're going to have someone come out to your house next week to give blood and urine and height and weight. Could you just give us some tips on how to maximize that?
Absolutely. First is, if you're not feeling so good, cancel or postpone. If something's going on with you,
interesting,
health and wellness wise, don't try to win the race, right?
Yes.
I'm going to meet this appointment.
You're not going to get any wards.
That is correct. And don't be a hero.
Yes.
Cancel or postpone if you're just not feeling your best. God forbid there's something super benign, but then again, pops. And now we're ordering medical records for something ridiculous, right?
Great point.
Good night's sleep. be really well rested. I typically recommend to do a morning appointment, but if you're not a morning person, you can certainly do it in the afternoon. Most of the tests they're running are not fasting tests,
Great,
like when your doctor sends you for those types of tests. But you should eat well that day if you are in the afternoon, eating well balanced. Have your best breakfast and lunch, not eat McDonald's before the appointment because you're rushing.
That's not an ice cream for lunch type of day.
No, it is not. It is not. Water. Cannot say enough about it from 2 standpoints. Number 1, water is the nectar of the gods. You should be drinking water. But number 2, it's going to be very hard to take urine sample from you if you say, I haven't drank water all day. My first glass was an hour ago.
Sure.
You're going to be sitting with this examiner till you can go, essentially. It also can have a really, really tough impact on your blood draw.
Yeah.
So if you know that you're someone who typically has a tough time giving blood, certainly let your advisor know that too. So we can try to work out where you can get your blood drawn, but also know, like, I need to drink a lot of water. I need to make sure I'm well hydrated so that sample goes correctly. Actually, don't do any heavy exercise. So if you're somebody who does run those
one excuse
marathons, or like my CrossFitting husband, you're not going to rush, off the machine.
I'll skip the gym that day.
Yes, to your appointment. It can actually throw off your blood test results as well. Certain levels will pop after exercise. Try to avoid caffeine. Can have a impact on blood pressure. And similar to, it's hard because some people don't love the idea of having any type of medical exam, but you really don't want your blood pressure to pop. So be sure to try to be calm and just, approach the exam like from a less anxious place.
Okay.
And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, I think
those are great. I would never have thought of some of those. So those were great. One
of the most major misconceptions is the fasting thing, because people oftentimes equate blood tests to best results or fasting results. Fasting results are ordered by your doctor. They're not anything to do with what levels are being ordered here. So don't fast, especially if you have an afternoon appointment.
Yeah. The working out, the drinking water. If you're not feeling well, I would never have thought of those. Those were great. So thank you for that. This was amazing. Amelia, this is like the unseen part of life insurance that nobody
underwriting the untold story.
Yes, the untold story. That's what we're going to title this episode. But you never talk about this part of the process. And you can tell by your level of expertise that you know what you're talking about. And we said this in the beginning, and it's important enough that we need to say it again. Life insurance is so critical to your financial future, to your portfolio, that as tough as the underwriting process could be, it does not hold any weight as to the importance of how important life insurance is. So do not let it stand in the way of you getting the proper coverage for yourself and your family.
Could not agree more. And thanks for the opportunity to really talk about something that can seem overwhelming. We actually kind of paused at various points like, wow, that's overwhelming. Yeah. It can be, but it is so super important. And hopefully you're going through the process at a time in your life where you can get coverage that will remain with you or that might be convertible and really hold on to that health and wellness rating as it pertains to your mortality and from an underwriting perspective.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Thank you again, Amelia, for being here. And that is our show for today. Thank you for listening to Master Your Money. Please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Every little bit helps. You can also follow us on our Instagram at Barnum Financial Group.
All opinions expressed by the program participants are solely their current opinions and do not reflect the opinions their respective parent companies or affiliates or the companies with which the program participants are affiliated. Investments or strategies mentioned in this program may not be suitable for you, and you should make your own independent decision regarding them. This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs, and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. You should strongly consider seeking advice from your own investment advisor. Securities and investment advisory services offered through qualified registered representatives of MML Investor Services, LLC. Member SIPC, 6 Corporate Drive, Shelton, Connecticut, 06484, telephone number 203-513-6000.